Hello dear students, I hope you are all fine and in good health. In this audio presentation, I will be discussing some important broad questions and answers from the chapter The Address. It is the second chapter from Snapshots. So dear students, let's start. Question number 1. Describe the narrator's first post-war meeting with Mrs. Doling. That means you have to describe the first meeting after the liberation of the Jews and after the end of the First World War. The first meeting between the narrator and Mrs. Doling. That is the main question. Now how we will proceed. When the narrator knocked at Mrs. Doling's door, we all know the address by now. It is 46 Marconi Street, and introduced herself as Mrs. S.'s daughter. Mrs. Doling showed no sign of recognition, and the real reason was that Mrs. Doling thought that now she came to claim her mother's belongings. Despite knowing her personally, she pretended of not knowing her. She held the door in a way making clear that the narrator was not welcome inside the house. For some time, she stared quietly at the narrator, at which she felt that it was not the person that she had been looking for. Now, the way she behaved with the narrator, the way she looked at the narrator, made the narrator puzzled. And the narrator once again looked at the address. And after it was confirmed that it is 46 Marconi Street, and moreover, Mrs. Doling was wearing the green knitted cardigan, that sweater that actually belonged to the narrator's mother. And the narrator can't make out in her mind that why Mrs. Doling was behaving in such a strange manner. When Mrs. Doling let her in, the narrator noticed her wearing her mother's green knitted cardigan. The lady saw her looking at the cardigan and hid herself partially behind the door. When the narrator mentioned her mother, she said that she had thought that none of the people who had left had come back, because she thought that no one had survived from the narrator's family, because the narrator's mother was a rich Jewish lady. The lady expressed regret at her inability to do anything for her, but the narrator insisted on talking to her, having come all the way for it. But Mrs. Doling was not at all interested to have a discussion or to interact with the narrator, and she was more interested to lock the door from inside. And she was not only that, even she was reluctant to welcome the narrator inside the house, because being a shrewd minded lady, she had a fear at the back of her mind that the narrator, that is Mrs. S.'s daughter, actually came to take possession of her mother's precious belongings. However, the lady refused to talk to her, claiming it was not a convenient time. The narrator had no option but to leave. So, with a heavy heart, with a pain in her heart, finally she decided to move out from that place, and she again went back to the railway station. So dear students, now I am moving on to question number 2. As you can see, this is also a very important question. You have to compare and contrast the narrator's mother, that is Mrs. S, and Mrs. Doling. So the question goes like this: contrast the character of the narrator's mother and Mrs. Doling. So the answer goes like this: the narrator's mother was a trusting woman, And Mrs. S, the narrator's mother, she blindly trusted everyone, and she was being exploited by Mrs. Doling in the name of friendship. And Mrs. Doling had taken all the utensils, the crockeries, even some of the expensive clothes also in the name of friendship from Mrs. S. She told her daughter about Mrs. Doling, an acquaintance, an old friend who had suddenly turned up and renewed their contact, and since then had been a regular visitor. Now, Mrs. Doling visited the house of Mrs. S with a motive, and her real motive was to illegally possess all the belongings, all the precious belongings of the narrator's mother. The mother did not doubt her kindness and was obliged that she insisted on taking all her nice things with her to save them. But that was a misconception on the part of the narrator's mother, because Mrs. Doling's real intention was to take full possession of all those things but never to return those things back. The mother was worried about Mrs. Doling getting a strain in her back from carrying the crockery and luggage in the large vases. When the narrator showed her disbelief, she was annoyed. And every time, the surprising thing is that every time Mrs. Doling used to come with an empty basket or an empty bag, and whenever she used to move out of the house, that basket or the bag used to be filled up with all the precious things. On the other hand, Mrs. Doling was an opportunist, very shrewd, very conniving sort of a lady. She renewed her contact primarily to take the antique things, the precious things, the old antique things, the costly things the narrator's mother owned. When the narrator came back after years, she made her feel unwelcome, as she did not wish to part with the things that had belonged to the narrator's mother. Later, after the war got over and after the liberation of the Jews, when the narrator came to meet with her by reaching her home address, that is also very significant in the course of this story, that is 46 Marconi Street. She behaved as if she never ever had seen the narrator, but from the story only we get to know that she was being introduced to Mrs. Doling by her own mother. She was rude and harsh with the narrator. She haven't behaved properly with the narrator, and the most unfortunate thing was that despite she being the friend of the narrator's mother, she pretended not to recognize the narrator and closed the door on her face as if the narrator was a sales girl, and that was very insulting. So I repeat this line, dear students, once again. She was rude and harsh with the narrator and did not allow her to enter the house. Now, dear students, I am moving on to one more question, a short question from this particular chapter. The question is, describe the narrator's second visit to Mrs. Doling's place. Now, the important thing is that when the narrator visited for the second time, she was allowed inside the house by Mrs. Doling's 15-year-old daughter. So let me continue. Describe the narrator's second visit to Mrs. Doling's place. On her second visit, a girl of about 15 years led the narrator in, and she noticed an old-fashioned iron Hanukkah candle holder that belonged to them. All the precious things that actually belonged to the narrator's mother previously, now illegally all those things are stuffed inside the living room of Mrs. Doling. And unlike Mrs. Doling, her daughter was innocent, candid, jovial and kind-hearted. And not only she allowed the narrator inside the house, but she even offered her a warm cup of tea also. but the things were kept, as you all know, by this time in a very haphazard manner. There is the maintenance was totally poor, and so the narrator felt totally suffocated and decided to move out of the room. The room had a strange, stressful effect. The atmosphere, the tasteless way everything was arranged, the ugly furniture or the damp smell that hung there, everything led the narrator to feel uncomfortable. She noticed the woolen tablecloth and recalled the burn mark on it that had never been replaced or repaired. Now, that burn mark that was on the woolen tablecloth near the edge, near the border region, that was never been repaired. But Mrs. Dowling previously promised the narrator's mother that she would preserve everything properly, and after the war gets over she herself will return the things back. But now the narrator could easily understand that the true nature of Mrs. Dowling was not to renew the friendship with her mother, but because of extreme greed and temptation, her real motive was to take full possession of all the precious things that actually belonged to her mother. And since now there is no proof, no legal evidence, she can't claim those things back. And this particular motive was at the back of her mind. Her mind means I'm talking about Mrs. Dowling, and that was the reason she haven't allowed the narrator inside the house. When the narrator visited this particular address, 46 Marconi Street, for the very first time, but on her second visit, she was not at home. Her daughter, her 15-year-old daughter, allowed the narrator inside the house. Moreover, when the girl put cups on the tea table and poured tea from a white pot with a gold border on the lid and the pewter plate, these things clouded her mind with strange emotions, because these things actually she recollected few past memories of all these things used to be in their own house, but now it is someone else who are using all these things. The narrator noticed various things that brought back old memories or memories of the past. The narrator rushed out for her train and she felt very uncomfortable. She felt suffocated. The room was a bit strange to her, but the things were very much familiar. But the things were kept in such a poor manner, with a poor maintenance and haphazard manner, that she decided to leave the house and decided to move on. The narrator rushed out for her train as the girl went to get their cutlery. As the narrator walked out, she heard clattering of spoons and forks. So as the narrator, after moving out of the house, and when she was on the road, now at that time she heard clattering of spoons and forks, the sound or the clattering sound of spoons and forks coming from inside the room. So dear students, kindly go through this audio presentation. Three broad questions in this audio presentation I had discussed. Please listen to this audio presentation, and if there is any doubt anywhere, let me know about it. Thank you students. Thank you all.